No meeting more interesting than this one over the last 24 hours of controversy with the Trump administration. I want to go back to a speech you gave to the Economic Club of New York in 2013. You quoted the American economist Walt Whitman, "Keep your face always toward the sunshine and shadows will fall behind you." Have you felt that way in the last 24 hours?
I wish there was a bit of sunshine out here in Washington, and there is no sunshine. But let me just address this controversy, as you called it. For a few years now, we have repeatedly said that a tax reform was absolutely needed and necessary in the United States, in particular a corporate tax reform. And there is no doubt in my mind and absolutely no ambiguity about that point. So it's needed, necessary, we've called for it, and we welcome the decision to actually think about a tax reform that would make taxation simpler, that would reduce the loopholes and many deductions, that would be focused on labor activity, help the middle class, that would be pro-growth. And I'm not going to pass judgment on the current draft that will be for consideration by Congress. I've done my tax reform in my days as finance minister, and I know what those drafts go through. They go through iteration, addendum, lobbying efforts. It's not the end of the day.
And we should make clear that Madame Lagarde not only is trade minister for the Republic of France, but then as finance minister as well, has received every domestic headache you can on this. The nuance to me, and Olivier Blanchard came to your defense 3 days ago, and Jason Furman came to your defense this morning, the former chairman of the President's
Council. I don't need anybody to defend me. I can defend myself.
I know you can defend yourself, but they defended you as PhD economists on the theory, like the PhD economist here. The distinction to me is between the blue book and the green book and the red book of the IMF. The linkage of tax reform to fiscal responsibility. How does the IMF link constructive tax reform with the worldwide idea of getting our debt house in order?
Well, what needs to be done is to look at the evidence, at the data, at the numbers, and then to determine policies on that basis, with in mind two things: the revenue, the spending, the political objective of being pro-growth, of wanting to improve the situation of the middle class, and of ultimately reducing excessive inequalities, if that is the case in that country. So that's what needs to happen. But clearly, in those countries that have a heavy debt burden, and those that have entitlements coming to fruition that will probably increase the spending, it is necessary to take into account that medium term and to make sure that any tax reform is revenue generating.
What is so important here is the tone of the IMF of a more optimistic world. Obviously, the United Kingdom is off their game with the battle over Brexit and all that, and there's other serious issues within poor emerging markets. But you also mark down the U.S. because, am I right, the IMF is doubtful on successful tax reform legislation in the short term?
We've actually marked up the U.S. economy compared with our July numbers. And then we've marked up a few other countries, including advanced economies. What we hope to see is implementation of the reforms that we have called for many years. A good, solid tax reform that will be simpler, where rates, particularly corporate rates, will be lower, with a base that is much more solid and clear. That's what we hope to see, and the sooner it goes through, the better.
Let's encapsulate the last 24 hours and then move on. Would you be willing to meet with the Secretary of Treasury or the President to clarify the IMF stance on this?
But I meet with Secretary of Treasury on a regular basis. I will see him tonight, so I'll be very.
Will this come up tonight, please? Let's get a head start on this right now.
I'll be very happy to explain to him exactly what I have explained to you.
When you speak to Secretary Mnuchin tonight, what will you advocate that the Trump administration should do? What should they be their next step forward in this?
I would say, based on the little experience I have of tax reforms, resist lobbying efforts.
Resist lobbying efforts. You heard it there. Madame Lagarde will not be having a cigar tonight at the Willard Hotel in New York with the lobbyists of Washington, D.C. Let us move on. The fact is it's a more optimistic meeting. If we look back 10 years of the financial crisis, have we reached escape velocity on all the agony of the last 10 years?
Let's hope so. But it's not guaranteed. So while we have certainly a better growth and better growth forecast, 3.6% for this year, 3.7% for next year, it's not shared across the world. You still have about 25% of the world measured in GDP, which is not enjoying that sort of stronger recovery. So while we see the sun shining, we're also seeing those clouds on the horizon and countries and people not having the benefit of it. So I think, my message to the policymakers in the next few days, and they're all coming in as of today, will be take the decisive actions in order to secure that recovery and in order to make sure that people actually have the benefit of it.
I saw you in New York with our John Micklethwaite, our editor-in-chief, on the idea of advocating forward women and women's rights within the world economy. One of the overlays of that challenge is technology. How does the International Monetary Fund look at the future of technology and link it into a better equality across income and wealth?
Well, one, it is critically important to help young people, our children, grandchildren, whoever, to get acquainted and fully adjusted to what is coming. That's reasonably easy if the budget is there. But it also should apply to those of us in advanced, emerging and low-income countries to actually also take ownership of those technologies, because they will be disruptive. They will be changing the way in which we manufacture, the way in which we provide services, the way in which financial markets are organized as well. And what we do here at the IMF is try to anticipate, from a financial stability point of view, what will be the impact of those fintechs, as we call them. We're seeing it, it's happening.
What do you need from China? They've got these incredibly important meetings coming up. We've heard interview after interview comparisons back 20 and 30 and 40 years to the federalism of Beijing. What do you need to come out of these important political meetings in China?
I certainly hope that they continue the reforms that they have started. Reining in credit is a necessity. Reforming the state-owned enterprises is a necessity. Continuing to reduce capacity in certain sectors is a necessity. So we would very much hope that this will be continued from an economic perspective.
A little bit more here on Europe, if I could. What a tumult in Europe. We saw the far right in Germany take a little bit of a popular vote to join the Bundestag in the last election. We see this historic election in your France. And within it all, there seems to be almost a lift to the European economy. When you read the Blue Book, which I know you read cover to cover, the World Economic Outlook, when you read the World Economic Outlook, can you say Europe's reached escape velocity, that Europe is beyond Eurosclerosis?
Europe will continue to go through episodes of soul-searching and examining the future and trying to restructure, consolidate. But I think there is an impetus, there is a momentum that has been created predominantly as a result of Emmanuel Macron's election in France and the hope that it has generated, as opposed to the fear that the other candidate would have induced, that things have to continue to be stronger, better governed, more of a political union. What form it takes is going to be debated between them. And there will be episodes, Tom, when you will despair of Europe.
Right.
And there will be moments when there will be huge hope. I think that model is of a different kind and needs to be structured, strengthened, and must be one of the options available for those who are developing.
One final question. I want to circle back again to your April 2013 Economic Club of New York speech. You were way, way out front of the coming challenges of the United States of America politically. Just, is you, as a citizen of France and with your work in Chicago years ago, how do you perceive the path forward for the people of America, given the turmoil of our politics right now?
I owe a lot to this country. I came here when I was 17, shortly after my father's death, and I have only met hospitality, warmth, support, respect, and tolerance. And I think that is deeply ingrained in the American spirit. And I have full trust that this is the real nature of
Madam
the people.
Lagarde, thank you so much. Madam Lagarde of the International Monetary Fund.